Welcome, everyone, to the Advanced Sports Analytics Podcast. It's Tuesday, May 11th. I'm here with Stuart Gibson. We're going to talk about the NBA main slate and the NBA single game. Stuart, how's it going?
Going well. SuperDraft has the big featured single game contest tonight for New York at LA Lakers. Late start. Should be good, though. There has been, I think, good overlay in some of these single game contests as of late. Good playing opportunity. I'm happy that we have our optimizer equipped for the single game champion mode slate so that, you can build lineups at scale, use the projections there, and so on and so forth. So, looking forward to it.
So yesterday, Gus from ASA, he covered the top 3 spots in NBA. That was pretty great. He said there was a late pivot that led him to have a duplicated lineup, and that's the reason he had all 3 up top. But he won by a good margin, like 15 points or so.
Yeah. So Gus manages the NBA projections most days. So when we're talking through some of the stuff, it's kind of Gus is looking at the minutes and figuring out where they go, plugging things through the model. He said, I was slacking with him this morning. He said, more or less used our optimals and did some upweighting for Dean Wade and Trae Young, which were a part of his optimal. It was pretty cool to see how the lineup came together. As we touched on the show, he did Cleveland, Indiana game stack. I think had Sabonis and might have been LeVert from the Indiana side, and then went with Wade and Trae Young on. Went with Dean Wade and Okoro, who we talked about a good bit from Cleveland, and then it looks like he actually only played players from 2 games, Indiana, Cleveland, and then did 2 Atlanta, Trae Young and Capella, plus Westbrook, who was just a total smash. Got it done. Looks like 3 scores over 80, 70 plus. LeVert was the low man at 55, but enough to get it done on the short slate. So it's pretty cool for him. He's I know been working hard on those projections, and to see it come together for a win is pretty nice.
The funny thing is that I played SuperDraft, and I used our projections with basically some rules to limit the Cleveland guys, and it did pretty well. I think I was 13th place and basically doubled the money. But then on DraftKings, I had 5 tickets, and I played the 5 tickets, and I had this for their big 100K up top, and I plugged in the ASA optimals as a little bit of a filler, knowing that I probably wouldn't play those as my tournament lineups. So I plugged them as a filler, and then I hand built my lineups. Basically, I didn't want as many Cleveland guys as the optimizer was giving me. But then I entered the 5 ASA lineups in the $5 tournament or the $7 tournament just to see how they would do. Basically, the ASA lineups would have come in second for 40K, and then like 4th, and then all of them cashed. So it was not very wise for me to override our optimizer and do my hand build. We were high on guys like Jakob Poeltl, and we were high on some low-owned guys that did very well. We were high on Nurkic. This is like on DraftKings. We were high on guys that were about 5% owned that did very, very well. Okay, so going into tonight, hopefully the updating will be super motivated tonight, since try to defend the title and make it 2 in a row for Gus. Tonight, biggest slate we've had in a while on SuperDraft, biggest in terms of money. We've got a big single game contest going on with basically close to 10K prizes all in, 5K for the main tournament, and then the main slate is a 10K guarantee with 2K up top. So let's jump into it. All right, tonight it's probably going to be not so much injury news. I don't know if you will agree with that, but I think we will not have a torrent of information coming at us. We know a lot of the stuff. The single game slate, New York, LA, will await some LA news, but Davis and Kuzma are probable. Okay, jumping right into the main slate, we have an optimal, which right now, let's see. Did you run the optimal? Because I realized I made a slight mistake when I ran it.
Yeah, so I'm running it now, and we're still high on the Indiana guys, Sabonis and LeVert. Really, the same factors that I think made them strong plays last night make them, strong plays tonight. And Sabonis didn't get kind of his big 40-minute run, so I do wonder if part of that was an effort to save him for tonight, knowing there was a back-to-back. So yeah, I think just another good night to plug in some of these Indiana guys. Not quite as good of a matchup going up against Philadelphia. They play slow and pretty good defense, but nonetheless, Indiana's playing very fast. They have injuries to some of their premier players, such that there's a lot of opportunity for Sabonis and LeVert, who are kind of the remaining stars in that team. Anthony Davis plugs in, or is fitting into 100% of our top 20 optimals without any rules or constraints. No LeBron, assuming Davis plays, that is, which I think seems likely. So yeah, no LeBron. I think just a ton of usage opportunity available for Davis. I think and no Schroeder as well. So those are kind of outside of Davis, the two highest usage players. We are quite high on some of the other Laker players. However, they're being beat out by like Brandon Clark, who is likely to start with Joe Val out and Jaren Jackson out. I think Clark, figures likely to get minutes in the mid to high 20s. Paul George and Jason Tatum at guard and forward. And then at center position, we are quite high on Vucevic, who has kind of picked up with Chicago as of late, and I think makes for a strong play tonight.
So starting at the guard position, looks like so Tatum in Jaylen Brown's absence is 98%. Is he forward only tonight?
He's got guard forward eligibility.
Okay, so he's our only, and then LeVert is 95% of optimals. So we have sort of LeVert and Tatum as lock plays, and then we've got an unusually sort of wide open guard position where we have Doncic at 22% of optimals, Buddy Hield at 18%, Ja at 11%, Kemba at 7%, Kyrie at 5%. So the guard position is somewhat open tonight. We have, just sorting by value, so those two Tatum and LeVert we have at 60 SuperDraft points. They sort of stand alone, and it's hard for other guys to beat them. But then you have a clump of guys between 51 and 55.5. So those five players are Buddy Hield, Bazemore, RJ Barrett, Kyle Anderson, and Devin Booker. RJ Barrett at a 1.6 multiplier has a lot of pop and probably will be under-owned by a little bit. So I think you want to kind of go by ownership for those guys, and I would include Zach LaVine in the conversation, who's 50.3 projected right now. So I kind of like the idea of locking Tatum and LeVert, and then going with Buddy Hield, Bazemore, Barrett, Kyle Anderson, Booker, and LaVine sprinkled in. And I think Barrett is probably the most intriguing tournament guy because he tends not to be super popular on SuperDraft, and he's got a lot of upside at that multiplier. So if we go below 50 projected SuperDraft points, it strikes me that there's a shortage of guys that can pop. Like Dylan Brooks, even at the 1.5 multiplier, he doesn't strike me as being likely enough to get in the top 3. Gary Trent, 1.35, same thing. KCP at 1.9, if the injuries fell just right, maybe, but probably not. J. Rich, no. Hardaway, no. Are you with me on this conversation? That
yeah. I mean, I think
these guys below 50 can get there.
Yeah. I mean, just in general, they're by being below 50, they're not the strongest projections. I mean, Ayton would be a guy I think maybe that could get there. He plays good minutes. Go ahead.
I was just doing guards.
Oh, I see. I got you.
But let's move over to forwards, because I think that's a pretty good summary of the guard conversation. I mean, I honestly believe that if we're ranking those, we have Tatum and LeVert as locks, like fade at your peril. Although the way that I would personally do it is lock Tatum and then do some LeVert fading, because
Sabonis is so strong,
Yeah, I would kind of maybe play LeVert something like half in tournaments. That's just how I would do it. And then you're choosing for the rest of the pool, Hield, Bazemore, Barrett, Anderson, Booker, LaVine. And honestly, I think they're all pretty good plays, with Bazemore probably being the worst, just because I mean, really, you're saying he's going to be top 3, which is probably going to be 60 SuperDraft points tonight. And that's a really good game for him. I mean, he's a fine play, but wouldn't be my preference, really. But the other guys can all get there. I think RJ Barrett is my favorite. He also gives you the possibility to make some pivots if you need to for that late game. Okay, forward position. If we're sorting on value, we have Davis and Sabonis at 66 SuperDraft points. They're both very close to 66 SuperDraft points, which is 8 points above Draymond Green, who's our 3rd projection. So that's very strong. And when guys are projected that strong at low multipliers, they tend to be great plays, which is why they tend to be very likely to finish in the top 3. So those are locks currently, although our optimizer just sort of knows that Davis is in for what we're projecting him 38 minutes. We can assume that they might tread a little carefully on him, so his projection could be seen as slightly fragile. So you could consider fading there. But let's just label right now Davis and Sabonis as strong priority plays. Then we have a very tightly grouped bunch sort of vying for third, and it really, I would say we essentially have seven people that we think are viable for the third best spot. We have 7 people that are currently projected between 54.3 and 58 SuperDraft points. Those 7 are Draymond Green, Metu, Randall, Clark, Giannis, Tristan Thompson, and Joel Embiid. And then you go to Bam, which is a pretty nice drop off. He's below 50 SuperDraft points. But Bam is a guy that would be reasonable to consider in your tournament pool. That said, you have to know that you're giving up a good bit in projection. Let's see. Those players, in cash games, we find that it's often reasonable to sort of err towards the player that gets there on low multiplier. So for instance, just to give an example, like Metu is projected for 56.75 SuperDraft points, and Giannis is projected for 55.21. But I think for cash games, the tighter distribution of your one multiplier, I think it makes sense. And I've just sort of on SuperDraft, obviously you see the lineups of the players that you're playing against, and Papa Gates is ex post most successful, and I notice a very strong tendency in his lineups to err towards the lower multiplier guy when 2 guys are close in projection.
Yeah, so those guys naturally are going to have a higher floor, and I think for cash or kind of 3-player contest purposes, I wouldn't be concerned if, like, let's say we're locking Davis, Sabonis, Tatum, LeVert, giving strong consideration to like a center like Vucevic. I'd be fine with continuing to pile on low multiplier guys like Paul George, who are projecting favorably, Julius Randle, Giannis. I have some concerns with tonight, but for tournament purposes, you do see like Davis 1-2, Sabonis 1-1-5, Tatum 1-1-5, LeVert 1-2, and I don't know. I'm of the mind that for tournament purposes, you do want to have some access to, high score potential. And you saw it just last night with Gus's winning lineup. Like, you had to take some shots on some of these high multiplier players. And, for a lineup that's just littered with guys in the 1 to like 1.25 range, you're kind of just saying like, all right, I want to win when every high multiplier player, kind of every deep play fails. And I just think on a big slate like tonight, the chances of that happening are pretty unlikely. So if we are, for tournaments, like if we have Davis, Sabonis, Tatum, LeVert in lineups, maybe someone like Vucevic, for that third forward position, I might be hesitant to pile on a guy like Paul George or Randall. Well, I think they seem like strong plays in isolation. It just is such a low cumulative kind of multiplier that I do worry that there's kind of low ceiling for a lineup like that. And while a guy like Metu or Brandon Clark or even like Buddy Hield at 135 or Tristan Thompson at 17, while these are riskier plays, by having that elevated multiplier, they just have access to a ceiling that I think, a guy like Paul George probably doesn't have. While Paul George has a great raw ceiling, the low 1-2 multiplier makes it hard for him to get to like 80 plus points that, I think a guy like Brandon Clark, could get to if he's listed in the starting lineup and gets kind of a good run with some Memphis front court injuries. Would you say, are you kind of aligned with that way of thinking for tournaments?
Absolutely. So tonight, what do you think about Tristan Thompson? He's in kind of a new spot. He's 1.7 multiplier. We have him projected for 54 points. He's a comparable play tonight to Brandon Clark, who's projected for 2 points higher than Thompson and at the 1.8 multiplier. What are your views on those two guys, Clark and Thompson?
Yeah, so I think Thompson is a bit more of a known commodity. Not so much like as far as his, well, I mean, he has been in the league for a while, so we kind of know what he is. But we just saw like Robert Williams miss this most recent game. Thompson got 32 minutes. I think there's kind of good confidence in the Thompson minutes projection. I guess I don't see too many paths to him failing to meet that minutes projection we have for him in a big way. The Clark thing I think is a little more volatile. Like J-Val has been very healthy this year, so we don't really know exactly what Memphis is going to do with Valanciunas out. We have seen a lot of missed time for Jaren Jackson. So, in early stretches in the season, we have seen Clark in kind of the mid to high 20s for minutes. Jaren Jackson has come back, played well, and Clark has been kind of in the high teens, low 20s. So, I think we are trying to be pretty conservative with our Brandon Clark minutes projection. We have him at 28 minutes. But, I could see that projection, I could see that being a bit too conservative. Memphis is going to be thin at kind of the center power forward position. But I think there is some fragility there. Like, they could kind of pull, just do unexpected stuff, play like a ton of Xavier Tillman, and maybe Clark gets kind of squeezed out by Tillman and Kyle Anderson's minutes ticking up a lot. They have a guy, Killian Tilly, off the bench, who I don't know too much about other than that he kind of plays this power forward center position. And there have been times this year where, teams, they kind of don't, they have like this second backup player. And when the starter's out, rather than jumping that backup into the starting role, they'll pull some guy off the bench to start and maybe only play him 18 minutes or so, but it does kind of cut into the kind of optimistic ceiling that we might have for a guy like Clark. But I don't know. I think Clark higher ceiling, lower floor. Thompson, probably better from a median standpoint.
So let's jump over to the center position, and then we will go over the single game slate a little bit. At the center position, you do have Davis, Sabonis, Embiid, Tristan Thompson, Metu, all with dual center power forward eligibility. So you can sort of play four forwards tonight if you want. We also have Vucevic at pure center eligible with the third highest center projection, 60 points. So usually we do like guys that are center only eligible because it gives you the opportunity to win the center position uniquely. Tonight we're a little bit thin there. We basically have we have Vooch, Ayton, Drummond, and Zubac as guys that could conceivably win. Ayton is 1.3 multiplier. He's going to be in a pretty good spot. Seems viable. I think, Yeah. I think Vooch will not be especially popular. So he seems like a great play at 60 projected super draft points. So start the conversation with these center-only eligible guys. Basically, Vooch, Ayton, Drummond, Zubac. How do you like those plays?
Yeah, so you would think that the return of Zach LaVine would really hurt Vucevic. It hasn't in the 3-game sample that we've seen so far. I mean, Vucevic has had usage rates of 34, 27, and 36 and a half in the 3 games that LaVine has been back, which is significantly higher than where it was in kind of Vucevic's first month or so with Chicago, in which LaVine was active. That being said, I guess I am a little wary of the sleeping giant that is LaVine. Like at times this year, he has been very high usage for Chicago, and that would figure to take opportunities away from Vucevic. But I don't know. Vucevic, his multiplier is a little higher than it usually is. I feel like he's usually in the 1-2, usually at 1-2 if I remember correctly. So yeah, I mean, I think Vucevic figures to be a strong play, but yeah, given how productive or how projectable some of these power forward center hybrids are, I think there's a decent chance that you don't need to go with a true center in the center slot. Yeah, Vucevic though I think would be the preferred choice there, and there is a pretty big drop off after that. I mean, we have the next highest projected true center as Ayton. What is it? A full 12 fantasy points post multiplier below Vucevic. I do think, I don't know if it were a slate where it's kind of thinner among these power forward center flexes, maybe Ayton could sneak into play, but even if Vucevic fails, it just does seem likely that someone from Davis, Sabonis, Randall, Tristan Thompson, Joel Embiid, some of these guys to me feel more likely to beat out Ayton. So, not one of these nights where I feel like I need to go with a true center at the center position. I think there's just too much value at kind of the center power forward flex.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. So let's pivot over and chat about the single game slate. They have a big single game slate tonight. Also, the cash games have been pretty active on these, so there's a good bit of activity, and I expect tonight will be popular. So for our optimizer, for people that use our optimizer, you go to Slate settings, drop all the games except LA, New York, run showdown mode for SuperDraft, and that will give you our optimals. Running 100 optimals, our captain ownership is reasonably well spread out. You have Caruso, Davis, RJ Barrett, and Caldwell Pope all with more than 10% of captain exposure. Caruso is our favorite captain at 35% exposure. He has a very large multiplier of 3.85, which is how he gets there. However, he only projects for 17 point. Sorry, that might not be right. Yeah, so he's a low usage guy. His minutes are a bit erratic. Basically, hit or miss play tonight, but we have him with a high mean projection. And he might be off people's radar. I don't know. What would you think he's off people's radar tonight?
I don't know. I mean, I think Caruso's been well documented as of late as being, thrust into the starting lineup and getting minutes in the high 20s, low 30s. But yeah, I mean, if people aren't paying close attention to the Lakers rotations or are not using projections, I would, think maybe he could go a little under the radar. Yeah, I mean, I think he's a real strong play. His usage has been up. His usage over the course of the season kind of has lived in the high teens, low 20s. Really, I mean, really contained within the teens. But he, in the starting role, has actually taken on a higher usage role. He's had 20% plus usage in 3 of the last 4 games. His minutes are comfortably in the high 20s, and he has a low 30s ceiling. He's been up over 27 minutes in his last 4 games. And he's just got a great multiplier on him. I mean, I think you look at these guys in the 2 to 3 multiplier range, and it's a lot of bench players or starters like Elfrid Payton, who just doesn't have access to super high minute ceiling. And I think the thing that's nice about Caruso for SuperDraft purposes is that he's a pretty active defender. Gets steals, gets reasonably good blocks for the position. As a guard, he's kind of not a total non-factor. As a kind of off-ball guard, I guess they have him listed as the starting point guard tonight. So yeah, I mean, I think Caruso makes for a strong play. Just going to have a lot of opportunity to score at the 2.55 for super flex, and the 3 and change for champion. And yeah, I think he's going to be a way to be different. I mean, there are enough stars in the game between Barrett, Davis, Randall. Derrick Rose has been very productive as of late. It could see people gravitating towards some of these more sure bet players at the champion slot. So yeah, I like sprinkling in some Caruso champion exposure. I think sometimes people get infatuated with a specific player that they like and say like, oh, I got to lock in so-and-so to captain. And, I think a good approach, and as our optimizer kind of promotes, is to be fairly diverse at the champion position. I mean, you can lock in a player, but not have them locked at champion mode. Or in the champion slot, you can like a player and play them in a bunch of your lineups. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to jam them in at champion in every single lineup. And that player that you like could have a great game, but he's still got to fend off 5 to 10 other players as far as the best value. So even the player who is kind of the best projected value, they're far from a lock to actually appear as the best value as the game plays out. So I think being diverse at champion makes sense for these type of contests.
So I have not played much single game, or rather I have played it, but I haven't given it a very close examination because I haven't played it for especially high stakes. But just sort of thumbing through this, I'm noticing not an error necessarily, but a peculiarity with the way that the multipliers are calculated, which would sort of skew you towards players like Caruso. It's I mean, technically, the way that I would do it is if you're having the 50% champion mode, then I would, which is what they're trying to do with champion, right? A 50% bonus.
Yeah.
So technically, yeah. Like if you have Caruso at a 2.55 unadjusted, my adjusted sort of the correct adjustment would be 3.28x, right? And then what they're doing is they're taking like the 155% bonus that's applied regularly, and then sort of, or rather, instead of doing it that way, which is the way they should do it, they're just multiplying 2.55 times 1.5 to get 3.825 and then rounding it up to 3.85.
Yeah.
So that's giving too much of a bonus at the captain spot to these high multiplier guys.
Well, it's actually, I don't think it's a high multiplication thing. It is it's a significant digits thing. I mean, they're truncating to, two decimal places. Any player whose utility multiplier ends in a 0.05. So like Davis at 1.15, Drummond at 1.25, Barrett 1.95. When you multiply that, like for example, Barrett 195 times 1.5, you get champion multipliers that end in point digit 25, so such that there's kind of three significant digits or three significant figures to the multiplier, and they do round those up. So like Barrett's true, 50% more multiplier would be 2.925, but they are only using two significant digits, so rounding these guys up to give them an extra 0.025 multiplier. So it's a small edge to some of these guys that have like a trailing 5 in their multiplier. But yeah, not totally insignificant. That is something I had noticed early on, and it's small but not totally insignificant. So we can see, and it might just be that it kind of works out as some of our favorite projections have a trailing 5, but Caruso, Barrett, and Davis all have some of the top champion exposure. So something to keep in mind. I think I wouldn't be like, oh, well, okay, I have to lock in a guy that has a trailing 0.5. But yeah, just understanding that little bonus is kind of built in there is, I think, important to call out.
So among our top 5 players that have total exposure of 50% or more, so Noel, Caldwell Pope, RJ Barrett, Davis, Caruso, would you sort of be fading at about those levels, like kind of fade? Noel and KCP are kind of good fade guys in general, because if they're going to be popular, they do kind of get all over the map a little bit. Randall at 36% of our optimals. He seems like a good play. Would you agree with my assessment that Rose and Bullock, our optimizers have them at 30% and 22%? Those would be guys that I'd be inclined to fade. Like, I would be inclined to a little bit fade Rose, Bullock, Taj, because they tend to play in fairly tight distributions. And Bullock especially, I would sort of not play, and Rose. Taj could maybe have a block aim and get you there at the high multiplier. Would you agree that Rose and Bullock are somewhat fadeable? I mean, quite fadeable.
Rose would be the guy I would prefer to kind of keep in. I haven't paid super close attention to the typical ownerships you see on some of these players, but Bullock, Noel, KCP, Noel in particular, for example, like you're kind of hoping that he gets 3+ blocks or something like that. And sometimes it can be valuable to fade a guy who is high variance, because if he's going to be high variance, popular play, if you get kind of the negative variance outcome for Noel and you're off him while many people are on him, I think there's some value being off of him. He also doesn't have like a huge minute ceiling. They're usually playing him in kind of the mid to high 20s range, but like his minutes kind of get capped at high 20s, even though Mitch Robinson is out. They do like giving Taj Gibson a good bit of run. Obi Toppin is still not getting a ton of run, but playing pretty much every game. Noel to me feels like kind of the strongest full fade of that group. And of course, it's just so low usage on the offensive end. You really need him to, get a double, get some blocks, or probably either a double or blocks to really be in lineup consideration. And he's just had games where he's been extremely quiet. So he would be kind of the guy I'd target fading of those high projected guys.
If you were doing a cash game, would you try to improve on our current optimal of Caruso at captain, Davis, RJ Barrett, Noel, and KCP?
Yeah, I mean, it probably would involve taking out Noel. I think of Noel as a guy who has a high, a higher mean projection than he does median projection, if that makes sense. And for cash purposes, I think prioritizing median projection is probably advantageous.
You would take Randall, presumably, or
yeah.
Or Rose.
Let's see. Yeah, Randall would be the next guy in if we fade Noel, and I think that's a good option to go.
All right, well, good stuff. We'll break here, and I will get back on. I won't be on Friday, but ASA will be on Friday.